Uh, Welcome everybody to the Thinkerneur exclusive interview with Ntate Mollo. The title of the topic and the conversation is Bua ke Mametse. And this idea of Bua ke Mametse, you get the sense and the essence of it. But basically, it's about this idea of um, so loosely translated is kupon translated Ntate Mollo.
Speak, I'm listening.
Speak up.
Boo, my mates.
Eh. But it goes deeper than just the translation of Bua ke Mametse. As you can,
Absolutely.
I think you also seen on the promotional posters, we said, don't just bring your A game, bring your all game. And if there's anybody who embodies this essence of bring your entire self into the boardroom, no holds barred, without shame, without doing anybody favors, making sure that you bring yourself to the boardroom as you are. And yesterday, as we were talking, we said it's not about bringing your professional self to the boardroom, but everything. And you get why we say that once we get into the conversation. So, the purpose of this exclusive interviews is that so when you look at many events or platforms, what they usually do is they focus on the individual and the title, and the person speaks about the career, but we never really get to see or hear about the thinking or what makes the individual behind. And I think it is a shame in that most events look for the title first, and then the title attaches to the name. So they will say we need a CMO, and then they say, okay, who are the CMOs? And then we find those people. And I think what you find is that because not many people have CMO titles, you lose. I think you lose a lot that you could learn from. So this platform tries to sort of fix that, to say there are so many people who are talented with so much knowledge, and I think it would be a shame if that knowledge is not shared. Without further ado, the first question is I'd like for Ntate Mollo to introduce himself in terms of who he is. And before that, I would just like to, I don't know if this is your title or your theme, but I think it is the perfect way to get into who are you. Uh, so you have a saying where you say, quote, I am currently disadvantaged, but previously advantaged. I'd like to repeat it again. I am currently disadvantaged, but previously advantaged. What does that mean?
Disadvantaged. Yeah,
Disadvantaged.
Previously advantaged. So, Kalabwan Tate Bogosi, Bomele Bontate, who are listening, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, my name is Kaibe Mollo, ke Mosotho, ke Mokwena wa Hamayani, ngwana leruo la kgomo, nga Motlwelwa. I am born and bred, not necessarily raised, but bred in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho. And I'm a proud Mosotho. And perhaps that talks to why there is that statement that I've made previously that I was previously advantaged, but currently disadvantaged. And why did I make that statement when I made it? My background, and for perhaps almost 20 of my growing up years, my formative years, I lived the life of privilege. And how did I do that? Because I was the son of a diplomat. My dad was an ambassador and a high commissioner for the Kingdom of Lesotho, and he was posted in many countries around the world. My first memories are of living in Canada. And from there, I lived a number of other countries. And I only really moved back to my home country of Lesotho when I was 11 years old in 1986. But even then, I only lived there for 4 years before moving to South Africa. So I grew up living definitely the life of privilege, of advantage. All the schools that I went to were private schools. The medium of education was in English. So when I used to get those comments, wow, you speak English so well, it puzzled me because actually I speak English much better than I speak Sesotho, which is my home language, which is the language of my parents, but it is not the language that I was educated in. It is not the language that I learned at school. It was the language that I spoke at home. And even amongst my siblings, we almost spoke English more than we spoke Sesotho. So it was very strange to hear. And I only heard it when I arrived in South Africa, this comment of, but you speak English so well. In every other country that I lived in, there was never such a comment, which was also interesting. So I definitely grew up living a life of privilege. Even where I went to high school and where I went to varsity, I went to UCT, excellent schools. High school, I went to the American school here in Johannesburg. So probably right up until I started working, I would say, yeah, no, I've definitely lived a privileged life. I can consider myself previously advantaged. And then when I hit working age, I I first try and get a job in Lesotho, and then you discover politics. And you discover that while you were living the life of privilege, you were living the life of privilege as part of a government affiliated party that when you come back from that life of privilege, that party is no longer popular. It is no longer in vogue. If anything, it is now being thrown to the dogs. So when you arrive at home after getting a degree at UCT and you're sort of, hey, here I am, I'm ready to come and work for my country. They're sort of, hey, everything in your degree, I mean, in your CV sounds good. The degree that you've done is useful. We like your interest. So Kana, you said, what's your full name? My full name is Kaibe Mollo. 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 Hi, hi, hi. Do you know Dade JK? Yeah, that's my father. Ish. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. Oh, so now you get your first taste of, oh, hey, maybe all of that privilege has gone. Then you come, and fortunately, you get a job in South Africa, and you've been hired at one of the greatest, I think, advertising agencies to come out of the country, Heard Boys, McCann Erickson. Um, and there they kind of treat you, okay, no, you're a young boy from Lesotho, come, we'll teach you and we'll show you the ropes and will get you trained as a marketer and as an advertising specialist. And that was wonderful until you now try and go into the world of marketing and corporate. And you might find that you get some jobs, but other jobs, they're sort of, so are you a South African citizen? Oh no, but I'm a permanent resident. Hey, no, as long as you're not a South African citizen, you're useless to us. You look like a black guy, you sound like an intelligent black guy, but actually to us, you're not a black guy. You might as well be a white man. So now you discover that yes, yes, I am once again previously advantaged, currently disadvantaged, because now, even though here I am, I've studied, I've tried to get some experience, I think I'm good at what I do. All the people that you ask to give you references will tell you that you're good. But just that fact that you are not fully South African, sorry, you won't help us out in our numbers or in whatever codes we need to fulfill. So it was something that I used to say to people who'd ask me how, as I said, you speak English so well, you went to private schools, what. Sort of, yes, I was previously advantaged, but now I'm currently disadvantaged.
Thank you. You touched on the herd boy story, but I will get back to that story.
Sure.
And I think for those who are listening, those who don't know herd boys, I think maybe you can just open a tab and start doing research on the herd boys. There's a fantastic story there, which makes it even more privileged to have you here, because it is one of those great stories of advertising industry. So
Absolutely.
then with regards to uh, you growing up, you saying you not being effectively articulate ka Sesotho, but so where does you maintaining your heritage and culture, where does it come from? Because you went to these private schools, but one would never say that actually you lacking in Sesotho. How were you able to maintain that?
I think primarily it was my parents. So perhaps not only because of who they are, but then complemented by the job that they had to do, i.e., being representatives of the country. My parents were very clear from the beginning. Number one, even our helper that we had in the various countries we traveled to, we didn't have local helpers. They brought somebody from Lesotho so that at least there's somebody who could always speak to us in Sesotho. Number two, they love to speak to us in Sotho. And my dad is a storyteller par excellence. And they'd always be telling us stories about where they grew up, actually what our country is. I remember in England saying to one of my teachers, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Lesotho." "Where's that?" "Oh, it's in Southern Africa." "Oh, you mean you're from South Africa?" "No, I'm from a country that is called Lesotho in Southern Africa." "Hey, when there's no such thing as Southern Africa, you're from South Africa." And I go back home and I am puzzled and I am completely stunned because my parents have always told me I'm from Lesotho, which is surrounded by South Africa, but it's not South Africa. And I go back and I'm sort of, how? But my teacher said, and you told me to respect my teachers and my parents were sort of, in this case, your teacher is speaking absolute trash. You are from Lesotho. Here's the map. Here is an atlas. Here is the globe. For those of you who are too young, you might not remember those things. But there is the country, Lesotho. And if you expand, there is our capital city, Maseru. And there is your village in the district, Kachasne. So my parents were very particular about making sure that I knew that I'm Mosotho, that this language of ours, Sesotho, is your first language. This is your home language. English is not your home language. And I think, they sometimes say absence makes the heart grow fonder. So because I didn't grow up that much in Lesotho, as I got older and eventually when we moved back to Lesotho, I really found not only my calling for home, but my passion for home and everything around home, language, culture, practices, rituals. Um, we grew up in places where they'd tell you that there's something called SPCA and animal cruelty. You grow up in Lesotho, and every single festive occasion or celebration, we're slaughtering. And so you also have to, you'd have to marry that, which I know my kids currently, they just don't get. But part of how I was raised was, hey, this is what we do. This is part of your tradition. This is part of your culture. Don't listen to anybody telling you that one culture is better than the other. This is your culture and they can have theirs, but you must know and appreciate and value yours. So definitely it was linked to growing up. It was linked to, as I said, my dad's job of representing the country as an ambassador or a high commissioner. And I mean, so inside the house or at the embassy, you have all these books about your country. You have all of these little bits of memorabilia, from the Basotho hat to the Basotho blanket. There are stories about who are the Basotho, what is the royal family, where do you sit in the in all of those totems, what is your clan name. You're always hearing your parents calling you, "Ebo Mokoena Sky," but my name is not Mokoena. No, Mokoena is not your name. That's your clan name. Oh, okay. And then what else goes with it? All of those things suddenly become so tasty and so wonderful, and you're sort of, oh wow, I can't wait to really know this and learn it. And yeah, it is part of me. It's not something that I had to go and get and I had to find. It's always been there, but I think when you're not at home, it perhaps becomes suppressed by the way you do things, the way you learn, what is the lang of the day, what's the nomenclature, what's the vernacular. And so there was nothing better than coming home and finally being part of of actually the real world of who you are.
Mm, that's beautiful. So I think the beautiful thing about and we've spoken a bit about when they ask you the question, "Who are you?" You know, it's like it's three words. Who are you? But it's so deep in. I think you'd have to have a certain level of awareness and knowledge of self to be able to answer that question to say, "Who am I?" You know, and I get a
And I
sense.
think, and I think if you remember, we also spoke about what is normally asked is, "Otswakai, where are you from?" And where are you from is exactly where I was sort of, hey, that question, you need to double click and tell me, what do you really want to know? Do you want to know where I'm from right now? Or do you want to know where I'm from in terms of haiso, where is my home versus where is my house versus where do I live? Because in when we talk, if you ask that in Lesotho, you can't just ask Motoko now, Otwakai, or even worse, Haya go guy. Haya go guy, where is home? Yes, yes. You're going to get icon umputa. But do you want to know where my roots are? Or do you want to know where my dad has built his home? Or do you want to know, now that I'm a grown up, where I have built my home? Or do you want to know where I live, which is not necessarily my house, but do you want to know where I live? So those things in English, where are you from seems so easy to answer. Oh, I'm from Joburg. Oh, I'm from the Eastern Cape. No, that you haven't told me anything yet, or I'm not clear what you are asking me. And it's interesting because, again, when I got to UCT, we found that question that amongst my South African brothers, it seemed like maybe you were asking something political because I'd be sort of, you'd ask them, where are they from? And they're sort of, well, what do you mean? I'm sort of, oh, I'm from Lesotho. And they're sort of, but didn't you say you live in Joburg? Yes, but I'm from Lesotho. And they'd say, oh, okay. And I never could, and I still don't understand those kinds of things, that their answers, a lot of people's answers had things like, oh, well, I'm originally from the Eastern Cape. I'm sort of, what does that mean, you're originally from the Eastern Cape? Where are you from now? And again, it was depending on you how you interpret that question, and perhaps to what we were talking about, your identity and what sometimes has become, in inverted commas, cultural imperialism. Once you live in Joburg, you're now, well, I've lived in Joburg for the last 10, 20 years. I'm from Joburg. No, now I'm still from Lesotho. I've lived in Joburg for 30 years, but I'm still from Lesotho. There's no originally about it. There's no, I'm not sure whether I'm from this. I'm from Lesotho, and I live in Johannesburg.
That's beautiful. And I think the way we speak about where we are from, it almost sounds like there's actually a huge responsibility placed on us, when we enter boardrooms or wherever we are. We're not just carrying ourselves, we're carrying everything about us, in also how you explain where you are from, or do you want to know about from my dad's side or from my mom's side, or
Yep.
so I get a sense of this idea of being Mosotho is sort of like non-negotiable. And what I like is because it speaks to this idea of understanding relevance and resonance, right? And in the conversations we've had in terms of work relations, this has been your consistent golden thread in terms of even the language we use, how we talk about things. In English oversimplifies things to a certain level that we might not be conscious of. The language we use, how we speak to the level of understanding that we have. I want to get to that in terms of where you were, but I'd like you to just tell maybe 5 minutes of your head boys story, or your head boys story. And I know this can go for 3 hours, but I'm just going to give you about 5 to 10 minutes to tell us
Sure.
how you got into Head Boys and how the agency grew, and
No, it's interesting because, again, um, as I said, part of that period when you're sort of, yes, here I am trying to come and work from home, like, or work for home, work for the country, like my dad has done, like my mom has done. Um, Now, because you're in the wrong political party or you're associated with the wrong political party, you can't. And I was very fortunate that a number of people that I had been to UCT with, who are my seniors then and who are still my seniors now, had obviously graduated from UCT and then moved on. So one of those gentlemen was a guy called Mohala Galibidze. And Lesotho and Maseru being quite small, our families knew each other. My dad had been talking to his dad and sort of, hey, the young man is struggling, trying to get a job. And Mahali's dad was sort of, yeah, but let him speak to Mahali. And in fact, his dad was sort of, no, don't even let him speak. I'll speak to Mahali. So he calls Mahali and he's sort of, hey, the young man needs a job. This is Kingwa no Muti. You are his older brother. Go and go and find him a job. And fortuitously and fortunately, Mohale was needing somebody in the space of an account executive. So he calls me up and he's sort of, Chief, I know you haven't studied advertising, but I know what you studied. I was your tutor at UCT. I think you can do this. And at least come and do it as a job. I have already spoken to Bo Ndate Hepin Chengela, Ndate Peter Vundla, who were the bosses at Head Boys, Ndate Dimape Serenyani. And I've told them that, listen, this guy, I can vouch for him. If he doesn't deliver within the year, you can fire both of us. Imagine somebody making such a statement to their bosses. And then we sort of, okay, I know if he's going to work in your team and you're going to vouch for him and you'll get him right, cool. And so that's how I started in the advertising game. And man, Head Boys was something else. It was, and this was the times when it was just after first elections going into the second election. So we'd had the 94 elections and we were about to go into the 99 elections. And one of the accounts that we were working on was the IEC. Man, it was just crazy to be part of something that it was still relatively new, relatively fresh, very, very appealing to everyone. We were a bunch of young Black guys and girls who, to some extent, were a little bit radical. There was a movement, I don't know whether you guys would remember it, called CAFE then, Communications and Advertising Forum for Empowerment, which was all about transforming the industry. And it was sexy, advertising was all about DJs and artists and clubs and launches. And man, for somebody fresh out of varsity, advertising was the spot to be in. But at Head Boys, they made sure that in order for you to play hard, you must make sure that you have worked hard first. And if you needed anybody to go through a university of advertising, the place to go was Head Boys. The various heads of department that they had, the accounts that they had, the brands that we worked on, the disciplines that the guys brought in. We and Datin Jingila will say in his book that one of the things that they demanded of us was that we had to come to work in at least a tie and proper pants. But the ties that we put on and the pants that we had, you'd get then that we sort of you'd rather take off this tie now. I mean, they were they were hard on us, but it was good because it was not just teaching you the work, it was also teaching you what it takes to be a professional. And that's why I'm sort of, yes, we can all bring our professional selves, but they also made sure that you didn't forget who you were. So it wasn't about we only speak English in the office. There was no such thing. immersion sessions in wherever our target markets were. We had to go. It wasn't about only the creative team would go or only the strategy team. Everybody on the account had to go. We did research ourselves within the agency where there were we'd bring in people and everybody had to participate. It didn't matter whether that was your client or not. You had to sit in and listen so that you got the insights, you got the learnings. um, it was crazy. You worked. I mean, there was a time when Head Boys had some of the biggest accounts in the country. We had Coca-Cola, SAA, Telcom, SABC. We had Unilever. We had Delta Motor Corporation with the Opel brands and the Isuzu brands. Mastercard. Man, the Castle McStout from SA Breweries that then led us to bringing Solantis and Heineken. Some of you won't even remember Solantis from back in the day. The late VMash and Electrowise, that was us. Sowetan, multiple accounts that we had that we built and that we delivered some really great work. Telcom ads, a lot of the Telcom ads that are revered, the dog ad, so I didn't work on the Mollo Mhlobo Wam ad, but the agency did. The Castle McStout ads, the Bonise ad. These were things that you'd sit there and you'd sort of, wow. And for me, who hadn't even studied marketing, it was sort of, okay, you need to do a crash course because as Mohali tells you, if you don't deliver, chief, we're both out of a job. You best make sure that you deliver. So man, we worked, but it paid off. Within a year, I get called into Ntate Njingla's office. He's sitting there with Bradimaps Serenyani, the MD of the agency, the head of strat of the agency. PV has just walked out of there, and they call you in, and you sit there and you are worried. You're sort of, yes, but and then they're sort of, man, you've done some really good work, and we think you're due for a promotion. And not only a promotion, we're actually going to even change your accounts. We're going to get you onto one of our biggest accounts, which at the time was Sprite. And as I said, Sprite was all about hip hop, was all about basketball. Two of my favorite things. And doing ads with emerging hip hop artists. Buffy Tlile from Mafikeng, Bongo Muffin, Oskido, guys like Ammunition, the late Mischief, a guy who doesn't rap anymore. Man, it was just amazing. So it was definitely a great school of advertising, a great school of professionalism. But also one of the things that I think I took from there was relationships and authenticity. Not only must you develop your relationships, but you must be authentic in those relationships because then they'll last. If you go into a relationship and you present your agent, not yourself, then you know that that relationship has very little chance of lasting because you have shown your agent, now you have to expect your agent all the time. And your agent does the job of just showing you the nice parts of you. It's not the full parts of you. And without the full parts of you, we actually can't know you. You can't know who you are, what you're about, how I connect with you. I can only connect with the superficial parts of you.
Wow, that's incredible. A truly amazing story, I believe. And what I loved was the emphasis on everybody getting involved. So what I find with the industry is that because of where we are as a department, so if I'm creative, okay, I worry about creative, and then I will let the strategist do all the work. I just want to be fed top line things that will help launch for the creative ideas versus everybody being immersed, everybody knowing the nuance, everybody attending meetings, everybody attending workshops, everybody going to research focus groups. If you're saying we're all going out everybody must get a feel of
100%.
what this thing is, because ultimately it's not just about the creative aspect, which is informed by all these things, right? For me, I think it's one of those things that will help actually build a culture where everybody knows what's going on at any given time. You know, at any point in
100%.
whether I'm working on the brief or not, but I
Or
know
not.
I've been to the branches. I've seen. I have an idea of the experience in the branch. Even if I were to meet you or you were to come to the office, and then I happen to see you at reception, like, hey, no, hey, nekile ko branch, mara ke bone ka re
Yeah,
branch, no man, go shota 1 2 3. Uh,
correct.
we're able to strike a conversation, which I think is great.
And it's the balance of knowing the brand and the business, but also knowing the market. And one of the things that I think people sometimes take for granted is if I've got a superficial, a very top line view of the market, I pretend that I know the market. I pretend that I understand the market. I get very fed up when I hear people, but I was in Kasi, I was at the Chisanyama, I also went in a and I washed my car at the car wash. And yeah, I've got a good idea of the township market. Really? So you mean for me to understand an LSM 15 CEO, all I have to do is go to his office and look at his car, drive through his estate, have a look at his house, and no, I'm good. I understand the mind of the CEO completely. It makes no sense. Um, and we've also done certain things in my time that perhaps seemed radical, but for me they were actually right in terms of being able to unpack that there really is a reality that people don't want to address. There's a friend of mine named Hello Mapai, who used to be at the SABC. One of the things that he said, which I'll never forget, is when he was selling the African language stations to the media agencies or the media departments within agencies, including ours at Head Boys, when you had media planners who were sort of, no, my client doesn't like African language stations. He doesn't think that they give him any value. They don't really deliver on his business objectives. So we can remove them from the schedule. How Hello said to those media planners once, wonderful. So this brand that you guys are refusing to put on the African language stations, wonderful. I am going to, at our own cost, I'm going to create an ad that says, that will fly on the African language stations and says, all of you who are listening to these stations, please don't go out and buy brand X just for the next month. Please don't go out and buy it. Thank you very much. Now, if you, as you've said, Mr. Media Planner or Miss Media Planner, that the listener of the African language station does not buy your product, does not contribute to your commercial success, then there should be zero effect, zero impact on your sales once I have done that ad that I'm about to do that tells people, please do not go out and buy brand X, because as you've said, you don't want to spend your money on my stations, on my African language stations, because they don't contribute to the business. Not one media planner was willing to do that. Why? Because they know that it's not true when we make those kinds of statements that this market doesn't do X or this market doesn't do Y. So there is the level of superficial understanding. There's often a double click level, but sometimes we are so happy to ignore that second level of insight, of understanding, because it doesn't align with the agenda that you're pushing or with what you believe is in your interest and the client's interest, but not necessarily in the consumer's interest. And for me, those are the things that part of having had to go through those insight sessions and really understanding the market and getting to grips with real and deep insight, not just observation, but insight. You need to understand what is pushing somebody. You need to understand the why behind something. so that when you are going to go and say, yes, but maybe we should rather do this. Yes, but wouldn't something like this work? You have some evidence or some supporting information to be able to make those proposals. We can't live in, and we can't, as conscientious marketers, be the guys who are going to go around and saying, right, every single advertisement or ad that we're doing that has Black people, let's have singing, let's have dancing, and let us have them ululating, because that's what Black people do.
Mm,
For me, it's one of those things that, I'm sort of, okay, and then what? And
mm,
in this case, why are they dancing and ululating? Because you've just developed a stronger washing powder. Really? Is that really what you see Black people as? So for me, there's a lot that is important to get to that second and third level of understanding, of insight, so that when we put out messages, so that when we put out work, we've tried as much as possible to avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen recently, that some of the advertisers and the marketers out there have made.
mm, absolutely. So I've got a couple of questions here. One is, which hat did you wear at the Head Boys agency? Which department were you in?
Oh, I was in a good question. At the time, when I started, I was in a department called client service. But by the time I left, that department was called account management. And for me, I think the transition to account management was actually much more accurate in terms of the job that we did. Client services at the time, people just called us the suits. We are the guys who just had to look good, go and get the CE, the cost estimate approved by client, and bring in the money. You didn't, to what you were saying earlier, you didn't necessarily, or they didn't believe that you had an understanding of the business, an understanding of the departments within the agency. You were just a go-between the agency and the client. And I think even that name, client service, helped foster that expectation. Whereas account management, it didn't say you are no longer supposed to still be client service in terms of relationship, but account management actually was much more about what we did. We managed accounts, we had to manage profitability, you had to understand the fullness of the account, from who we're talking to, what the product can do for them, and how we want to go and talk about it out there, both in terms of messaging, in terms of media environments, and in terms of results. So yeah, it was client service, but I think a more accurate description is account management.
Mm. And what I like about you is that even though it's client service, but you so the question is what hat did you wear then? But I think you wear all the hats now, you know, in terms
Absolutely.
fundamental understanding of strategy, creative, all parts of the business. And I think that's what actually the account management role does for you, because
Mm.
you speak to everyone, you engage with everyone. The brief comes in, you speak to strategists and the creatives and everybody. So in that sense, I think that was like the best foundation. You know,
100%.
because it forces you, whether you have an open mind to learn or not, you're gonna have to engage with people, have an understanding. When you go into the meeting, know that okay, I've seen this presentation. Even if the
Yes.
strategist was not dead, I'll take over, and the meeting carries on. Well, I hope the meeting doesn't carry on, but you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I mean, even basic things like going and sitting with an art director and seeing the impact of changing two words in some copy that had already been set in a layout. Because you think, because you work on Microsoft Word, you can just delete and auto format happens and it's done. Now you see an art director saying, yes, you've now taken out these two words. I now have to go and change the entire layout, and they'll tell you about spacing and kerning. And you're sort of what? And only when you've sat there and watched these guys do this, and you realize we have now been sitting here for 2 hours. But it's because of the detail, the discipline, the preciseness that even then the art directors had to deliver in a piece of work that, to your point, if you were not a diligent account manager, you might have said, okay, I go and do the work, call me when you're done. But because it was important, as I said, the university of advertising, it was important for us to go in there and really understand as much as possible, so that even when you're telling the client, yes, Mr. Client, I know that you want it by tomorrow, but it's just not possible. You please need to give us another day. You can unpack why. It was back in the day, it was almost saying, even when you say resize, Mr. Client, let's go to the photocopy machine. If you say you want to turn something from A4 into A3, you don't just say double. There are ratios even on the photocopy machine to make sure that it doesn't just stretch abnormally. So then they start to get the idea that, oh, okay, at least with that example, I've got what you're saying. Cool, you have to go and reposition and rework and great.
Okay. So I've got a question that leads to your philosophy with regards to communication, especially particularly to the majority of South African audiences. But if you can
Yep.
just do a quick recap of all the companies that you've worked for, whether it's agencies or from a corporate point of view.
All of them. Okay. So I
If there,
started working.
if there are too many, you can just name it.
So I've worked for 3 agencies in my career. I worked for Head Boys. I worked for Head Boys' sister company, McCann Erickson World Group Africa, which worked everywhere. It worked. Head Boys was a South Africa-based agency. McCann Erickson World Group was the continental agency. And then I also worked for Ogilvy Africa, which was also the Ogilvy version of the Africa agency. And then in terms of corporates that I've worked for Celsi, I've worked for ABSA, I've worked for BP, and I've worked for obviously African Bank. And then I've also worked for an entity that was in between agency and corporate, which was called Yardstick. And Yardstick was a consultancy that dealt with agency search and evaluations, that dealt with relationship management, and that dealt with training and development of smaller agencies on specific advertising related issues. So I've kind of worked on, yes, we always say it's 2 parts of the chain, but having worked at Yardstick, there are also some things that I find in there that, like when we're going to go and search for a new agency, for example, I don't just leave it to procurement. I'm now able to participate quite probably sometimes much more knowledgeably than others might be able to do in terms of that pitch process, agency selection, agency evaluation, agency appointment. So, yeah.
So the point that you speak to, I think it's a beautiful point in terms of where you've been. So the
Yeah.
reason I like that question is that in the previous interview that I did with him, Zamo, he spoke about, this concept of having breadth and width to your
Breadth and depth.
depth. Yes,
Yeah.
breadth and breadth. So and then you get in some instances where you know how we are from a creative point of view. We present an idea, you say,
Yep.
guys, and it's a psychological thing, right? So when you give feedback, you pull from all your experience. It's not just the thing that you're seeing in front of you. You pull from experience from C, from BP, and then it gives you perspective on what you should say about this piece of work. And then because we just invested in this thing that we presented, we go, I client next.
Yeah.
Misconception that clients don't know anything. Hey, they don't know creativity. But when you start digging into your history, where you've been, you realize, or actually, you're seeing beyond the creative thing that we've presented. So I wanted to ask you, what is your creative philosophy in terms of creating work and then either translating it to vernacular language or without giving too much away, what is your creative philosophy between English work that from the English medium versus one that you would do, for example, a Sesotho script for the CDFM?
So you know it's a loaded question because we've discussed this many times with you. So my philosophy is quite simple. Work must work. And ideally, we must produce great work that works great. So the way to do that is to make sure that the work talks to the audience that you want it to talk to, delivering the message that you want to land in a way that resonates and is impactful and ideally makes them do that thing that it is you want them to do, whether it's just to know about it, whether it's to understand something different, or whether it's to get up and do something. So because language is such a intrinsic and intricate thing, you cannot ever, I don't care who says what, you cannot ever take a concept that was created based on language for a particular market, based on that market's insights, understandings, realities that will resonate with that market, and then assume that you can translate it into a completely different market that has completely different insights, that has different realities, that is looking for different things, and say, but they are in the same LSM group, or they all live in Sandton, or they all drive certain types of cars. I don't believe in that completely. So you know very well that I will never ask for a translation, ever. In fact, if you present, and I will look to see whether something has been translated. Because if it's translated for me, then I know that the work that has been done is not work. It is the easy way out. There's no way, as I say, that you can try and speak to me when I am sitting in my home in Tabanchu, in Kwakwa, in Lady Brand, in the Free State. Speak to me as a Mosotho speaking man who believes in cultural, traditional rituals, and say you are going to speak to me exactly as you would as somebody of my same age who also went to UCT, but who comes from Stellenbosch, who knows about wine, and who actually aspires to be in Europe versus being in the mountains of Lesotho. And the only thing that connects us is that, but we both are the same age, we both have a university degree from UCT, we both work in corporate, and we both earn the same kind of money. All you've done is looked at us superficially, you have not looked at us deeply at all. And also with translation, for us as Africans who speak vernacular languages, just the fact that languages that are already close together can have such a miscommunication if you use the wrong words. Imagine translating from English into Sesotho. I think we made this example. In Sepedi, there is a word, or there's a phrase, kilapi. That same phrase exists exactly in Sesotho, kilapi. But in Sesotho, kilapile means I'm hungry. Whereas in Sepedi, kilapile means I'm tired.
Yes.
So if all you've done is you've translated it, and all you've said is, oh, this script was written, and the words come to a point where it says, it's the evening, the guy is about to go to sleep, and he says, kilapi. Then you translate it, and somebody who doesn't know just knows, oh, I am Pedi speaking, kilapile means I'm hungry. It's late, the guy's about to go to bed, and he says, I'm hungry. Now, immediately you've lost the plot. You've completely lost me as the listener to this radio ad, because I'm wondering, Kanti, what are these people saying? Darren Chengila will use an example, which for me, I've also seen. We all know our wonderful chicken brand that talks about finger licking good. When that was translated in Sesotho, it was ilatsiswa monwana. It makes your fingers taste good. But that's not what finger licking good means. Finger licking good means imonati ho otlanyeka liminwa. But because you have just done a translation, and unfortunately, in this case, you didn't even do a literal one. You almost tried to say finger licking. Oh, why would I lick my finger? It makes my fingers taste good. What? That is not, that is rubbish. And back in the day, we also know the infamous, for those of you who are old enough, pine nut. And the English line, if you don't know pine nut, you don't know nothing. And nothing was about being crazy and being wild and being different. But now the Sesotho translation, how to be pine nut, how to be little. Because they just thought, oh, nothing is just an interesting play on nothing. But you haven't looked to understand what is pine nut about. So for me, it can't even be a debate. Somebody comes into me and says, listen, we've created a great ad in English and we're going to try and translate it into vernac, forget it. I'm sort of, don't even start with me. I'm saying, go and look at that concept. The concept that you have come up with to create the work. Forget about all the scripts and all the layouts. The concept that you have come up with to create the work for this audience. Go and test that concept with this market. And if the concept works, then execute the concept for this market, not translate the work that you've done based on this concept for the other market. Forget that.
Absolutely. No, 100%. I remember I posted something on Facebook about how we should, I get it, you know, people, we've got Body Show Max, we've got Netflix. See, the problem with everybody consuming the same content is that we have a homogeneous reference or point of view. So we're not watching all these programs that are, you know, the good ones that speak to us, you know. Everybody comes with a reference, and sometimes I see that's how people sell ideas. They're like, you know this thing on Netflix? You know how, yeah, that's the one. It's like how? The idea is so just like that, you know? And then no, and because you're not immersed, you're not into this thing. Because I think we can talk the whole day about whether TV is good or not, but I think there are some instances where it reminds you and it shows you how people live, or it might refer to something. And then as a black professional, you come back to, you know, to the office, you're saying, there's this thing, man, kasi, that you do. One, maybe you're not articulating yourself properly. Secondly, because you are watching Netflix, you miss out on the content that you could easily pull out from YouTube and say, this is what I'm trying to say, and show
100%.
people this is what I mean when I say whatever I'm trying to relate to you. So I've got a couple of questions. I see we've got 4 minutes, and I doubt that we maybe we might go slightly over. But I've got a question from Mel Klapi Le Wabile. I'm looking at Eugene's question, and I think maybe Eugene, I should make you a panelist. Come on screen and ask your question. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I understand the question, but I'll start with Mel. So Mel, thanks for the great compliment, great content indeed. I just want to know how one can effectively transition their brands from a youth market to a more matured market without alienating the original market. And then the second one is, how do you think COVID-19 changed marketing in your view from Wabile?
Okay, so the first one, I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I think that there's one way that a brand can sustain itself across age groups. So look at YFM. YFM is clear, it is about youth audience. And YFM chooses to be a youth audience that is of a particular age group and of a particular headspace. So as long as you are in that headspace, YFM is relevant for you. Once you become older, maybe it stops being relevant for you, and so you move on. But Nikes, for example, Nikes are good for young, middle-aged, old, veterans, it doesn't matter. So it's about what your objective is. If your objective is to create a youth product, then be consistent with that. Be committed to that so that you don't mess it up. If you want to then say, hang on, there are parts of this brand that we believe can appeal to a broader audience, take those parts of the brand and make sure that you've done your homework, you've done the research, and go and articulate them and express them because you know that they will align with the older brand. So it's not, for me, it's not about a particular campaign or a particular activity, whether that's PR or whether that's advertising. It is about saying, what is the proposition that is creating the affinity per market? So the proposition in the youth market, is it identical to the proposition we're going to have in the more mature market? If it's not identical, then craft it so that it resonates, and then go and create campaigns based on the proposition. Don't just look to say, this campaign worked here, we're going to go and flight it at an older market using older actors. That is a recipe for disaster. So it really has to go back to proposition, intent, and understanding. If you don't have an understanding of your audience, you're going to struggle. And then in terms of marketing during COVID, the big thing about marketing and advertising is about connecting with people. And, one of the things that I keep saying is that from back in the day, even though people these days like to, I think, talk about data and big data as if it's something new, right from back in the days when I started, we had to collect multiple data points to understand our audience. We did something called a day in the life of this individual, because you wanted to see what is their headspace, what are their various media touch points, what is their attitude at a certain time, how are they traveling, what are they doing? Why? Because all those multiple touch points lead you to say, so this is when it's a good time to advertise or to market or to do whatever activity, and they will be in this mood, so I should probably try and make my message do a certain thing. So what we found from COVID is that one of the biggest things is that we've seen that because during lockdown 1, especially lockdown level 5, people went traveling, a lot of people were on TV, on digital and social media. So if all you're looking for is audiences, that's where you find audiences. However, you also had to have thought, but what is the headspace of this audience? Now, when people are watching, what are they watching? Suddenly there was an increase in news and actuality programming, because people wanted to hear what's going on with this thing. What's happening with lockdown? What are the new pieces of information that we know about this virus or about whatever the case is? So now, if you were just going to advertise in the news, you had to understand the headspace of that person who's watching the news. They weren't in the headspace of, I want to be now looking for something that's entertaining me. I'm looking for something that's informing me. Versus the people who are then watching the soapies or the reality shows. Those are people who are, I've been anxious, I need something to relax me, I need something to calm me down, great. And then also in terms of what their intention was. During lockdown, again, 5, people were sort of, hey, we don't know what the world is going to give us in future. Maybe I'm not that keen on exposing myself to risk. So suddenly people aren't necessarily going out for loans or going out for credit. They're more about, let's consolidate, let me manage the money that I have, let me stick to what I know. So it's definitely changed. Number 1, the usage of media. Number 2, the necessity to understand headspace and attitude. Number 3, the timing of messaging. Now lockdown 5 can change to 4, to change to 3. So you need to also be aware that each of those lockdown levels has a certain thing, but there's always COVID in the background. And number 4, just what the reality of an audience is. 6 months ago, people thought that lockdown was going to be 21 days. 6 months later, so many people have lost jobs. So many people are saying the economy is what is killing them. So you have to know all of that, and that will affect everything from messaging to media placement, to how you craft what you say and where you put it.
Okay, cool. So I've given permission to Eugene to
Eugene.
uh, ask a question. Are you able to ask? You can go. You can go live. Yes, Eugene. I see your mic is on.
Yes.
Okay, we
Okay,
can hear
cool.
you now.
Please shoot.
Yes. Am I live now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. You can ask.
Okay, okay. So thank you. Thank you very much, Bogosi. Yeah?
Go ahead, Eugene.
So I just wanted to understand, not to deviate from the conversation.
Yeah, we're listening.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can hear you. Eugene? Okay. No, it's not working. So I think we're gonna close off the interview. I think uh, Eugene is not playing ball. So I'd like you to close off with just to speak a little bit about African Bank. You know, so the question then from me would be why African Bank? So I've got so many options out there. You know, we've seen other people doing digital banking, and then there are the juggernauts of the industry. You know, why African Bank? Is there a need for African Bank?
So you must remember when I joined African Bank. I joined African Bank in 2016. Uh, in 2015. And 2015, we were still in curatorship, and we were about to exit curatorship in 2016. And part of what was presented to me was the opportunity to either rebuild or reposition a financial services brand that had some positive as well as some negative history baggage around it. And for me, I was sort of, this is a wonderful challenge. The if theoretically the brand was at a very low point, could you, with some of your strategies, with some of the tactics that you wanted to use, with some of the buy-in that you needed to get from the business, could you turn around a brand such that it moved from where perhaps it was at one of its lowest points to a place where it regained some brand stature, it regained some brand health, it delivered on, it made and delivered some brand promises, and it contributed, the brand contributed to the business. So I looked at it when I was approached, and I was sort of, no, this is a challenge that I'm happy to have, because there will definitely be clarity at the end of your stay there as to whether you have failed or whether you have succeeded. If African Bank is still where it is 2015, 3 to 5 years later, theoretically you should be fired. You should be fired, and if anything, you must be told to give back the money that you've been paid all of those years, because you wasted the bank's time. Um, but not only that, once I then really understood African Bank, even before I joined, but just having had some conversations and asking the questions about, so yes, I've heard about this bank, but what is it when you say there is still some positivity around this brand? What is the positivity around the brand? When I heard about the people that spoke so glowingly about African Bank because of how they saw that African Bank had helped them, I thought, again, this is something that I definitely want to be part of, because it can only, again, serve to talk to that insight that I have spoken about over and over, that, okay, well, then it means that you should be able to go and connect with something that consumers out there are saying, build on it, and showcase how this brand, yes, it might have been in trouble, but here it is. It has learned from its mistakes. It's coming out of curatorship. It is becoming stronger and stronger, and it's going to be a sustainable force to be reckoned with as it continues. So that's why I joined, and that's why I'm still here 5 years later, because I think, number one, I needed to get on a journey that, it's not yet complete, but definitely we have moved very far from where we were when I joined.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I think it's been very insightful. Sorry, Eugene, I couldn't get your answer, but great insights that Tumulo definitely enjoyed from Wabile.
So if Eugene wants to drop me a mail, he can, and I'll try and answer him. You can just text Eugene my email address there.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So this is the end of our exclusive interview. I hope it has been insightful for everybody, and I hope that William Davis tuning in from the US. Great to hear Mr. Mollo's expertise. Thank you, William.
Will Dave. Shout out Young Legends, Big Will.
Fantastic. So I hope everybody got insight into Tatomullo, and I hope you inspired to not only bring your professional self into the boardroom, but your entire self, all of you, into the boardroom. Thank you very much. And this is the end of the session. Hopefully you'll be able to tune into more exclusive interviews that are coming. Thank you very much, and I thank you, sir. And
Thank you,
everybody
Dad.
who joined in. Thank you. Thank you. Brian, Ifwe, Katlego, Kile, Makala, Mamello, Mel, Wabile, Onika, Ronald, Siabonga, Susan, Talia, hey Talia, Debucho,
Hey, Talia.
Trevor, Tiamo, Vuelwa, Wambui, Wendy. Thank you very much. And cheers.
Thanks, guys.